I was raised on a small 80-acre farm in western Ohio. My mom took us to church, but Dad rarely attended. He didn't become a Christian until much later in life. My grandfather was my mentor as a Christian. I was a junior in college before I began to sense a call to the ministry, but numerous hints had been dropped by my pastor and several friends for some years. During the second quarter of my junior year, I asked the Lord to tell me whether I was truly being called to the ministry or whether the Lord just simply wanted me to be willing to serve. One day I was reading the book of Ephesians and came upon chapter 6, verse 20. Wasn't even a whole sentence, but it stood out in bold-faced print. For which I am an ambassador in bonds, that therein I may speak boldly as I ought to speak. It seems a bit odd when I tell it, but it hit me like a thunderclap from heaven. I've never again doubted that I was called to be a pastor. When I told my grandfather that weekend, though, I told him I felt called to the ministry. This life elder in the church wisely looked at me and said, well, all I can say is, if you can do anything else and be happy, don't go into the ministry. I've never found anything else in 56 years I could give my life to and be happy. Now, when it came to stewardship, I'd have to say that my then non-Christian father set a great example. Dad always planted soybeans the year after corn, so there was a lot of volunteer corn in those rows of soybeans. Corn and beans might make a good meal, but not a good crop for the combine. You pick corn, you combine beans. One year Dad offered my sister and I $5 each if we would cut and pull the corn out of the rows of beans. Like most preteen kids, we made a game out of it. We made up a song that we sang as we walked down the rows. We've been working in the bean field all the livelong day. We've been working in the bean field 'cause our daddy told us so. Well, we got tuckered out about 5 rows before we finished, and Dad refused to pay us over Mom's objection. But he said, an agreement is an agreement. Any time up until when I combine, they're welcome to finish, but until they do, they don't get paid. It was a negative lesson, but here I am 68 or 70 years later and still remember it. That said, while he didn't pay us then, from time to time he'd give us some spending money. We never had an allowance. He didn't believe in that. But we often gave 10% of our spending money to the church on the next Sunday. That was how we learned to tithe. For more, visit the nalc.org/stewardship.